The saga with the leaking coolant continues. What I discovered was that it still leaked after I put the RTV in. So what I've done now is that I've actually got some sharpening stones, knife sharpening stones, and I've ground down this mating surface. You can see there are still some blemishes there, but I think gasket sealer will probably do the trick there. So what I'm going to do is it didn't have a thermostat, so I've got a thermostat. There's a 165 degree Fahrenheit thermostat, so that's what the car obviously needs. And then I'll put in a gasket, and I'll put in some Permatex high-tack gasket sealer. Okay, I've now got the gasket sealant on there. I've put the gasket on there. I'll just put the cap on and tighten it down, and fingers crossed we now have a sealed thermostat housing cover. This Heath Robinson contraption is used to pressurize the coolant system. I've got a power bleeder feeding compressed air into the top of the filler neck of the coolant system. I've blocked off the drainage pipe and the overflow pipe, and I'm pressurizing the power bleeder. What I see is that it's leaking, as we know, from the flange between the thermostat housing and the filler neck, but also from the temperature sensor. So we will have to address that. I've removed the temperature sensor and placed it with a bung. I pressurized the system to 6 psi, and I found out there was some air coming out of the hose clamps. I tightened them, and it looks like we're staying at around 6 psi. Let's leave that for a while, and if that holds, then we'll start the car and see whether we get any coolant leaks. One of the things I needed to install on the car was a reverse switch. So when I'm in reverse gear, the reverse lights come on. The gearbox that's in the car is a Quaife Rocket CR gearbox. It's a race gearbox, and it doesn't have a facility to mount a reverse switch. So what I did, I created a design, use Send Cut Send to actually build for me. And you can see here, I got a couple of them made, and they're relatively inexpensive. And the hole goes around the gear shifter base, and the long arm is used to, I'll bend it and I'll mount this switch in here, which is just a momentary action switch. So if we look at the bracket itself, you can see it's hanging here. And you can see what it looks like. There's the round bit that goes around the gear knob. You see I drilled a hole for the switch itself, and I bent it at a right angle. And this will be mounted in the car. But first I have to wire it up. Okay, we are under the car, and you see the little press button there. That is actually the reverse light wire, and that's the attachment that goes on the standard Ford gearbox. I don't have a switch on this gearbox, so what I'm going to do is splice in a wire, take it to the top of the gearbox, and use it to wire in my switch. Here is the bracket with the switch installed. You can see that I've got it around the collar, the base of the gear change, and if I go into first gear, the gear lever moves past the switch, third and fourth, and if I go into reverse, we hit the switch. So this is a non-destructive way of adding a reverse switch into the car. The transmission tunnel will hide the switch, so this will be all nicely tucked away. I finally have the transmission tunnel all buttoned up. I've got the cover on there. I do have some carpeting that can go in the footwell and over the transmission tunnel. That will be something that I'll install quite a bit later, if at all. At the moment, I'm quite liking this raw aluminium look. Okay, now I'm going to add a spring to the butterfly here. So I'm undoing the end of the shaft, the butterfly shaft, just removing this, and then I've got an arm and a bracket with a spring that I'll attach. Here we have the kit. We can see the arm that goes on the butterfly shaft. We can see the bracket that goes along the top, the spring that goes between the arm and the bracket at the top. We also have a locking tab and some new screws and washers. Now let's mount them onto the carburetor. So now we have the idle return spring installed. With the throttle, you'll see that the spring is actually pulling that butterfly on the secondary carburetor back. Now we just have to test to see whether it actually does the trick.
Now